KMSU.
Hello.
Wade Barrett, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Dustin. How are you?
I am excellent. I'm glad to have you on today.
No, thank you for having us on. We appreciate it.
Well, I have a few questions for you, if that's all right.
Yep, sure, far away.
I wanted to kind of ask you a couple overall questions. First of all, what made you decide to join the wrestling business?
I grew up as a huge fan of WWE. I started watching probably about 1989 or 1990. And from the moment I watched it, I was completely hooked. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. These crazy characters were on and great costumes, amazing athleticism, the storylines, the pyrotechnics. To me, it was just the ultimate form of entertainment as a young kid. And I really stuck with it throughout my teens, into my early 20s. And when I got to my early 20s, I made the decision that I'm a big guy, I'm athletic, I'm pretty tough. I felt that I would be able to be a pretty good pro wrestler. So I started training in the UK and ultimately worked my way over to the States, where WWE offered me a contract, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I know I was reading you possibly could have been a marine biologist and then bare-knuckle boxing and then wrestling. It's definitely an interesting transition through things.
Yeah, I've had quite a varied career, that's fair to say. Yeah, that was right. I always felt that with the marine biology thing, I went to university and got a degree. I always felt that I needed some sort of backup plan because the chances of making it as a pro wrestler are pretty slim. Obviously, you get a lot of kids who daydream about being in the NFL or playing in the Premier League in the UK, playing soccer. And I was a kid who was dreaming about being a wrestler. But I was smart enough to know that the chances of things working out and making a living from it were pretty slim. So even though I was going to give it everything I got, I did need a backup plan. And so that's why I got the degree in marine biology. And on top of that, the bare knuckle fighting was something I kind of accidentally fell into. It was just something that I could make money out of in the short term, and I was pretty good at it. And it was something that that I was really only too happy to get away from once the wrestling opportunities came up. So I transitioned over pretty easily from that.
Now, speaking of the transition, would you say, pro wrestling over in Europe, was it a lot different compared to in the States, and was it difficult to make that transition?
I think for the most part, pro wrestling over in the UK and over in Europe these days is very, very similar to WWE in terms of the style. I think if you go back 20 or 30 years, the style over there was completely different. It was its own unique style, but then WWE came over and kind of infiltrated the markets over there, and people saw that as what pro wrestling should be like, and the old British style kind of died out. So I think for the most part, anything that's going on over in Europe in terms of a wrestling scene is really just trying to imitate WWE these days, but it's obviously on a much smaller scale and a much lower budget. So, I felt the transition was fairly easy.
Well, one thing, as far as going throughout the history of wrestling, it seems like a lot of guys outside of North America, when they come to the States, they're either seen as, like the freedom-hating foreigners or those bad stereotypes. Especially in the last 10 years in the WWE, it seems like, wrestlers from other continents are really kind of in the forefront and becoming fan favorites. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're right. I think if you go back in history, WWE was very much a North American company, and there might only have been 2 or 3 different foreigners in there at any time, and so it was pretty easy to kind of label stereotypes on them and make them portray stereotypical characters of America hating and all that kind of stuff. But these days, I think with satellite television, digital TV, internet and stuff like that, the world is a much smaller place. I think WWE has really done a great job of growing around the globe and continues to do that. And now you've got Japanese guys here, English guys, Scottish guys, Welsh guys, Irish, Swiss, South Americans, South Africans. There's kind of every flavor of country is in WWE at the moment, and we're always looking to expand. And I think when that happens, it becomes a little difficult to try and make us all the same thing of American hating bad guys. So I think even with myself, I've never really displayed a hatred for America. I love it out here. I've chosen to live here. I've chosen to make this my home for the foreseeable future. So I think the characters we portray these days are perhaps a little more realistic than what they were in the past.
Sure. I've been joined now by my co-host, Ton. I want to introduce you to him.
Hey, man, how you doing?
Hey, Tom. I'm good, thank you.
Good. I'm glad we got you here. I was going to ask you quick. Now, you had like a pretty big feud with John Cena early in your career with that Nexus storyline, and you ended up like being in some major, main events and stuff. What are your thoughts on doing that so early?
A lot of people told me at the time that they were amazed that I could handle the pressure, and they felt it was a huge step up to go from being a guy who was essentially unknown like I was, into being the kind of the number one bad guy in WWE and headlining pay-per-view after pay-per-view. And I didn't really agree with that. To me, I didn't feel too much pressure at the time. I'd always felt pressure prior to that. I put a lot of pressure on myself to get to WWE and to get into a good spot in WWE. And it felt to me that when I was doing all that stuff, that kind of my dreams were coming true, and it felt like the pressure, in a lot of ways, was actually off me. And even today, I feel a lot more pressure on myself when things aren't going so well in my career, and I'm not in those highlighted positions in WWE. I'm not getting good roles on TV. I put a lot more pressure on myself then than I do when I'm actually at the top. So I suppose different people look at it in different ways, but I'd take that run and getting back to the top in WWE over pretty much anything else I've done since. So to me, those were the best times.
So would you say John Cena is in a short list of your favorite guys, or who are some of your favorite guys to work with?
I think ultimately anybody who's at the top or near the top in WWE is the kind of guy I want to be wrestling and taking on. I mean, John's a great performer. He goes out, he gets the reactions, but ultimately if you're wrestling John Cena or you're in a program with John Cena, that means you're in a very highlighted spot on the show. You're probably going to be main eventing, and that's kind of where I feel I want to be. But in terms of that, other people who I really enjoy taking on too, I really enjoy wrestling Randy Orton, who I'm going to be wrestling Sunday night in Rochester. I enjoy wrestling Kofi Kingston, Sheamus, The Miz. I've wrestled quite a lot lately. He's a lot of fun in the ring. He's very good. So yeah, I really have quite a varied number of guys that I like to get in the ring with, and I love taking on different styles and stuff like that, and continuing to learn and grow as a performer.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you're taking on Randy Orton this Sunday in Rochester, and I think it was the last time maybe that you were in Minnesota. You kind of had a bit of a nasty spill. I know you had that elbow injury, and is this the first time you've been back in the ring in Minnesota?
I've actually been back once before. I went back to the arena where I did the injury. It was an interesting evening. It's not one of the best moments of my career, that's for sure. It led to me taking 6 months off and getting a surgery, and that's one of the reasons why we stress very hard not to try this at home. If you look at guys in WWE, the performers really are, in my opinion, the very best wrestlers in the world. We do this 4 or 5 nights a week, sometimes 7 nights a week. I've been wrestling for 10 years. I train all the time in gyms, and the guys have really got themselves to a level where they can quite confidently say they're the best in the world at doing this. And even though we are that good and we're that well trained, accidents happen, things go wrong, and that's what happened with me when I broke my arm. Which is why we stress so much to kids, especially. They shouldn't be trying the stuff that they see us doing on TV, and parents certainly have a responsibility of making sure that if they see their kids messing around, pretending to wrestle in the back garden, they need to knock it on the head and stop it, because serious injuries do occur. And whereas I was looked after very well by WWE after the injury, they got me paid for my surgery and my rehab and all that stuff. It's a lot more difficult when you've got kids involved and stuff, and you've got to pay for all that yourself. So right. We always stress to definitely not try any of this at home.
Well, here's a question that I know is on everyone's mind. When does Wade Barrett become the champ? Whether it be heavyweight, WWE, when is this happening?
I feel like I've got all the tools to do it. I feel like I've displayed that from day one in WWE. I think I'm, in terms of my abilities, there's absolutely zero doubt in my mind that I could win the World Championship tomorrow and be perfectly fine in that role. I've said since 2010, every single year, that this is my year, this is my year, this is my year. And it just hasn't worked out for one reason or another. So, I'm still 100% focused on getting there. But in terms of predicting when it's going to happen, I don't know. In my opinion, I should have won it already by now. It hasn't happened, but fingers crossed. My plan is to make that happen at some point in the future. But predicting when, I have no idea. I've got it wrong for the last 3 years, so I'm about to start predicting again now.
Well, and you mentioned making sure that you have backup plans and stuff earlier on if wrestling doesn't work out. Obviously, it's worked out great for you, but I know you've been acting lately. I know you were in a Dead Man Down film. Is that something you might see yourself moving into after your wrestling career is winding down?
Yeah, Dead Man Down was a WWE production. It was the first film I've been involved in, and I got to do it through being injured, the injury we spoke about a little earlier. And that was a lot of fun, actually. I really enjoyed it. I'd never really given too much thought to acting prior to that, but certainly because I enjoyed that a lot, I'd be looking to get involved in projects in the future, whether that's while I still wrestle or after wrestling. It's something that I feel like I showed an aptitude for, and I did enjoy doing it. Other things I enjoyed too, I really enjoy being on the commentary desk in WWE. That's something I've done quite a lot of in my career at various levels, and I enjoy doing that. And believe it or not, I also I have kind of a side dream of wanting to be a radio presenter. So you never know, maybe one day I'll be coming up and working with you guys.
Oh, well, that would definitely be a drop in pay for you, I'm sure.
I don't know about that.
Well, it's been great having you on, Wade. Last question for you. If there was somebody that you could wrestle, somebody from the past, one of your all-time favorites, who do you think that would be?
I think my all-time favorite would be the British Bulldog, Dave the Boy Smith. He was a guy when I was growing up, I was a huge fan of his. And he was kind of a big inspiration for me, being a kid from the UK, growing up watching all these Americans wrestle and being very proud of the one English guy who was over there. He was a huge inspiration for me growing up to say to myself, well, if he did it, why can't I? So, he was always my favorite as a kid, and unfortunately he passed away about 10 years ago now, but he was one guy who I would have loved to have had the opportunity to get in the ring with.
Excellent. Well, again, Wade, we're looking forward to seeing you on Sunday, taking on Randy Orton, and I'm sure you'll have the title in no time.
Let's hope so.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Wade.
Cool. Nice one. Thanks for having us on.
All right.
Thanks. Have a good one.